Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to pull off the most vital bits of knowledge, the really surprising facts from some pretty complex topics, just for you.
Yeah, making sense of the big stuff.
Exactly. And today we are definitely diving deep into one of the 20th century's, well, most impactful and controversial figures, Saddam Hussein.
A huge figure.
Our source material is drawn from detailed excerpts of Saddam Hussein, Rise, Reign, and Ruin. And our mission really is to give you a clear path to understanding his life, his leadership, and his ultimate downfall.
Cutting through the noise.
That's the idea. Get to the core insights. He undeniably left a massive mark on the 20th century.
He certainly did. You know, Saddam was a leader who ruled Iraq with, well, an iron fist, but paradoxically, he also oversaw these periods of pretty significant national development.
Right, it's that contrast.
Exactly. But it came at this tremendous cost. Ultimately, he led the country right to the edge of destruction. His story is really one of unchecked ambition, systemic oppression, and in the end, a profoundly tragic end.
Okay, let's unpack this then, right from the start. Saddam Hussein, born April 28, 1937, Al-Ajah, a small village near Tikrit, Iraq.
Humble beginnings.
Very humble. His early life was marked by, real poverty, serious hardship. His father died before he was even born.
Right.
And he ended up being raised by his uncle after his mother remarried. That sounds like a tough start for anyone.
It really does. And the influence of that uncle, well, it's absolutely critical here.
Why is that?
Well, his uncle was a fervent nationalist, a staunch supporter of the Ba'ath Party, and this really shaped Saddam's early political thinking, his alignment.
Okay, so that's the connection.
Precisely. Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party. It was a secular Arab nationalist group, and honestly, he climbed the ranks incredibly quickly. It wasn't just politics for him, it was like foundational to his entire worldview.
And that ascent was quick. Fast forward to 1968. The Ba'ath Party actually seizes power in a coup.
Right, a pivotal moment.
And Saddam becomes vice president. The president then was Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, who was, interestingly, also a close relative.
Yes, family ties played a role, but Saddam didn't just rely on that.
So what was his strategy then? How did he consolidate power so effectively once he was VP? Were there, real challenges to his rise at that point?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key point because it wasn't just handed to him. As vice president, he immediately started this meticulous process of consolidating power.
How so?
He systematically put loyalists, his people, into every significant state institution. We're talking military, intelligence, government ministries, everything.
Covering all the bases.
Completely. And at the same time, he was ruthless in eliminating, not just pushing aside, but eliminating any opponents, real or even just perceived.
Wow.
His method was basically sowing fear and demanding loyalty simultaneously. So by the time he made his final move, the groundwork for, unquestioning obedience was pretty much already laid.
Which brings us to that really pivotal moment in 1979. Saddam forces President al-Bakr to resign.
Makes himself president. Exactly. President of Iraq. Now, the story often told is that this was quite smooth. Was there any real internal resistance, or had he just dismantled all opposition by then?
Well, it looked seamless from the outside, didn't it? But that was really a testament to how effectively he'd already neutralized any genuine threats.
So the groundwork paid off.
Absolutely. Remember that public purge? Members of the Revolutionary Command Council dragged away, some executed right there? That sent a chilling message.
A very clear message.
It was calculated. A demonstration to cement his absolute authority. And once he had that firmly in control, Iraq entered this period that, as you said, is often described as a paradox.
It really is fascinating, isn't it, that duality? On one hand, you have this undeniable progress, modernization even, but on the other, just horrific oppression. Let's start with the progress side. What did he actually achieve?
Well, he did initiate significant modernization efforts. Crucially, he nationalized the oil industry.
Big move. Huge. It dramatically boosted Iraq's revenue, and that money allowed for substantial investments in education, healthcare, infrastructure. We saw a genuine period of, relatively speaking, economic development.
So things were improving.
Literacy rates went up, access to medical care expanded, modern roads, buildings. Iraq was developing.
So for an ordinary Iraqi, maybe things seemed to be getting better materially. But what was that flip side? You mentioned oppression. How did those internal policies, like nationalizing oil,
Mm.
actually affect daily life beyond just the economic numbers? Were there societal shifts tied to this?
That's where it gets really complex and quite insightful, actually. Saddam sort of weaponized that development. It wasn't just about growth.
What do you mean?
He used the oil money, the social services strategically. It was a way to create dependency, build control. By providing material benefits, he kind of subtly co-opted parts of the population.
I see.
So the modernization and the brutal oppression weren't just a paradox. They were, in a way, a calculated, though horrific strategy for keeping the regime stable.
And the oppression side?
Oh, it was severe. He established this vast security apparatus, the Mukhabarat and others, specifically designed to crush any dissent.
No tolerance at all.
None. Human rights violations were just rampant. We're talking extrajudicial killings, widespread torture, forced disappearances becoming commonplace. Political opponents were systematically targeted.
And he used existing divisions, too.
He deliberately fanned sectarianism, Shia versus Sunni, Arab versus Kurd, to strengthen his grip, playing groups off each other, deepening divisions that, frankly, we still see the effects of today.
And it wasn't just internal stuff, was it? His foreign policy decisions, they arguably defined his whole rule and its end.
Absolutely. Huge impact.
Let's shift there. The major strategic errors, starting with the Iran-Iraq War. He attacks Iran in 1980.
And that war drags on for 8 devastating years. Immense losses, human and financial, for both countries. Just staggering.
What was he thinking? What was the motivation for starting such a massive, costly war?
Well, multiple reasons, probably. But primarily, it seems, a desire to weaken the Iranian Revolution. He saw it as a big ideological threat to his secular regime next door.
And regional dominance.
Yes, definitely. He wanted to establish Iraq as the top dog in the region. And a particularly chilling part of this war was the indiscriminate use of chemical weapons.
Against the Kurds, right, Halabja.
Most notoriously Halabja, yes, but used elsewhere too. The war ultimately just burdened Iraq with incredible debt and smashed its economy, a consequence he seems to have just completely underestimated.
And it feels like those economic problems led directly to the next blunder. It certainly set the stage, the 1990 invasion of Kuwait. It almost feels like he was doubling down after the Iran war didn't pay off.
He absolutely was. His justifications, he accused Kuwait of stealing Iraqi oil, drilling sideways under the border, things like that.
And a historical claim.
And he pushed the claim that Kuwait was historically just a part of Iraq, the 19th province, but this blatant occupation triggered severe global backlash, immediate UN sanctions.
The world reacted strongly.
Very strongly. The international community, already wary after the Iran-Iraq war, saw this as just an unforgivable act of aggression.
Which then led, of course, to the massive international response, the U.S.-led coalition, Operation Desert Storm in '91.
Right. Attacking Iraq, liberating Kuwait.
How did that war leave Iraq strategically?
It inflicted profound damage. Iraq's military was seriously weakened, maybe not destroyed, but significantly degraded. And then came even stricter international sanctions.
Things.
Utterly devastating for the country's economy and its people. If you connect the dots, these foreign policy disasters, one after another, they just systematically isolated Iraq. They dismantled its protections, both internal and external. It really set the stage, maybe irreversibly, for the regime's later collapse.
Which brings us then to that final chapter, Saddam Hussein's fall and eventually his execution. After the 9/11 attacks in 2001, the U.S. really started focusing on him again.
Yes, the rhetoric ramped up significantly.
The accusations about weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, and alleged ties to terrorism, Al-Qaeda.
And it's really vital to add context here. While those allegations were a primary justification for the U.S. decision to invade Iraq in 2003,
Yes.
solid evidence for WMDs was never actually found later on. But the allegations themselves played a massive role in shaping international opinion and providing the casus belli, the reason for war.
Right, the justification was key at the time. And that invasion began March 20th, 2003, U.S. and its allies.
And, perhaps surprisingly to some, Saddam's army offered relatively little organized resistance on a national scale. Baghdad fell within weeks.
And Saddam himself?
He vanished, went into hiding.
But not forever. He was captured December 13th, 2003. Found hiding in that small hole, the Spider Hole, near Tikrit, his hometown. Quite an image.
A defining image, really. After his capture, the legal process began. He was arrested, put on trial by the Iraqi Special Tribunal.
What were the charges?
War crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, a long list. After a lengthy trial, he was sentenced to death. That was November 5th, 2006, specifically for the 1982 Dujail massacre, the killing of 148 Shia Iraqis after an assassination attempt against him there.
And the final act? His execution. December 30th, 2006.
The end of his life.
So, looking back at all this,
Huh.
this incredibly complex, often brutal, devastating story, what does it all mean? What were the fundamental reasons behind his fall, his death? Going beyond just saying he made bad choices, what's the sort of deeper takeaway here?
Well, when you synthesize the core causes, it really seems to boil down to a few key things. A consistent, almost fatalistic misreading of international power and how it worked.
Underestimating the response.
Consistently. Coupled with this internal repression that ultimately hollowed out his own regime, leaving it brittle, his hunger for absolute power created an oppressive state. Nobody could challenge him internally.
Which made him blind, maybe.
Perhaps. And his aggressive foreign policy decisions, one after another, just completely isolated him on the world stage.
Can we break those factors down a bit more?
Sure. The Iran-Iraq War, as we said, didn't just ruin Iraq economically. It severely weakened the country internally, militarily, made it vulnerable.
Okay.
Then the invasion of Kuwait. That was just a decisive, catastrophic mistake. It united the world against him, led directly to those crippling sanctions, isolated him completely.
Point is no return.
Arguably, yes. Then the WMD allegations, whether they were true or not, almost didn't matter in the end. They provided the crucial public justification for the U.S.-led attack that finally toppled him.
Right.
And underpinning all of it, his government's relentless oppression, the human rights violations that firmly cemented his image as a tyrant internationally. It eroded any potential support he might have had, inside or outside Iraq.
So the foreign policy wasn't separate from the internal stuff?
Not at all. The key insight, maybe, is that his foreign policy didn't just create external enemies. It systematically dismantled Iraq's own shields, internal resilience, external alliances, ensuring his eventual collapse was almost inevitable. And, the effects of his rule. They are still so visible in Iraqi society, in its politics today. His story really stands as a powerful, cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked ambition and power.
This has been a really comprehensive deep dive, hasn't it, into Saddam Hussein's incredibly complex legacy, from those humble beginnings, that ruthless rise, to the devastating impact on Iraq, and of course his eventual fall. We've covered a huge amount. Hopefully you listening feel you have a much more complete picture now.
And maybe as you reflect on all this, consider this final thought. How does a leader who is clearly capable of both developing aspects of a nation and inflicting just immense cruelty leave such a lasting, such an indelible mark on a society?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And what profound lessons can we draw from a trajectory like his about leadership itself, about its consequences? Especially in complex, volatile regions like the Middle East, it's worth pondering, I think, the long-term echoes of a rule like Saddam Hussein's.